to be an evil, bad person who has to go away for every last day of their life. Every last day. So, Dave, are you that person? Or are you the person that has struggled with someone who's, as you said, for 16 years you love her, but she's schizophrenic, and she goes here and she goes there? Because there's no reasonable person, Dave, in the world that wouldn't believe that you harmed Robin.
Do you know what it's like to scream for help and have no one listen, to know in your bones that someone you love is in danger, but every authority figure tells you you're wrong? Martha's daughter Kim does, because for 30 agonizing days, she told police exactly what happened. She named the killer. She pointed to the house. She begged them to break down the door, and they did nothing, while Kim fought desperately to save her mother. The man who murdered Martha was living in her house, sleeping in her bed, cashing her checks, and texting from her phone, pretending to be her. And the worst part, police helped him get away with it. This is the story of a woman who saw death coming and tried to warn everyone. A daughter who solved her own mother's murder, while detectives dismissed her as paranoid. And a monster who buried his victim in plain sight, so confident no one would look that he literally stood on top of her grave and lied to officers' faces. 30 days. That's how long Martha lay in that shallow pit while the world moved on without her. And by the time they finally listened to Kim, what they found in that backyard would haunt every single person who ignored her warnings. Let me tell you about the last time Martha was seen alive. It's early Monday morning in Akron. The sun hasn't fully risen yet, and Martha Freitag, 53 years old, is standing outside her house talking to police. She's asking for a restraining order against her boyfriend, David Callahan. Officers know her well, too well. Domestic disputes, mental health episodes, the kind of calls that make cops roll their eyes because they've been here before. Martha has schizophrenia. She's called them dozens of times, and every single time, it's been nothing. Another fight. Another breakdown. Another false alarm. So when Martha stands there that morning, her words scattered and confused, officers see exactly what they expect to see. A woman off her meds, paranoid, unstable, not someone in genuine danger. But if you listen closely, really listen, you can hear it. The fear underneath the confusion, the desperation masked by mental illness. She's trying to tell them something. She needs help, real help, and they're about to walk away and leave her alone with the man who's going to kill her. What officers don't know is that David is standing inside the house right now, watching, waiting, counting the seconds until their car pulls away, because the moment they leave, he's going to make absolutely certain Martha never calls them again, and in just a few hours, she'll be dead, her body wrapped in plastic, buried in the backyard, and sealed under a fire pit. For the next month, David will live in her house, spend her money, and text her family pretending to be her. And when her daughter Kim starts asking questions, when she tells police exactly what happened, when she names David as the killer, they won't believe her either, because Martha was mentally ill, and mentally ill women, apparently, aren't worth investigating. Think about what it must have been like for Martha in those final moments, standing outside her own home, trying to articulate the danger she felt, knowing that the words weren't coming out right, knowing that her mental illness was clouding her ability to communicate clearly, but feeling deep in her soul that she was running out of time. She'd lived with David for 16 years. She knew his temper. She knew his capacity for violence. And on that morning, she knew something had fundamentally shifted. This wasn't just another fight. This was different. The officers who responded that morning had no way of knowing they were witnessing Martha's last desperate attempt to save her own life. They saw what they'd been conditioned to see through years of responding to similar calls. A woman in crisis, a mental health issue, not a homicide in progress. And that's the tragedy of it all, because Martha was doing everything right. She was reaching out. She was asking for help. She was trying to use the system designed to protect people like her. But the system had already decided she wasn't credible. Let's go back further, because to understand how 30 days of horror unfolded, you need to understand the relationship between Martha and David. They'd been together since 2002, 16 years of chaos, breaking up, getting back together, screaming matches that brought police to the door over and over again. Martha's schizophrenia made things complicated. She was paranoid, accusatory, convinced David was cheating when he wasn't. He'd leave for a day or two to let her cool down, then come back when things settled. It was a pattern. Toxic, yes, but not unusual. David knew how to work the system. He knew Martha's mental illness made her seem unreliable. He knew that when she called police, they'd see a schizophrenic woman having an episode, not a victim in danger. And he used that. For years, he used that. So when Martha called police that final Monday morning, David wasn't worried. This was routine. Officers would show up, see Martha acting erratic, and leave. He'd done this dance before, but this time was different. This time, Martha had gone too far. She'd called for a restraining order. She'd involved authorities again, and David had reached his limit. The moment police drove off, he snapped. Inside the house, away from witnesses, he grabbed a wooden axe handle and struck Martha in the head. When she collapsed, he wrapped a rope around her neck and pulled until she stopped breathing. Then he waited for nightfall, carried her body outside, and buried her in a shallow pit in the backyard. He covered her with dirt, built a fire on top, and burned anything that might give him away. David thought he'd gotten away with it. A woman with schizophrenia, few friends, a family that barely talked to her. No one would come looking. But what David didn't account for was Kim, Martha's daughter, the one person who refused to let her mother disappear without a fight. What's particularly chilling about David's behavior in those hours after the murder is his calculated calmness. He didn't panic. He didn't flee. He methodically planned every step. He knew exactly where to bury her. He knew how to cover his tracks. He understood that Martha's mental health history would buy him time, days, maybe weeks, and he was right. The confidence it takes to murder someone and then calmly wait for nightfall to dispose of the body speaks to a level of premeditation that contradicts his later claims that he just snapped. This wasn't a moment of blind rage. This was controlled violence, followed by calculated cover-up. David had hours between the time police left and the time he killed Martha. Hours to cool down, hours to walk away, hours to make a different choice. But he didn't. He waited. He planned, and when the moment came, He executed that plan with disturbing efficiency. When Martha stopped answering her phone, Kim knew immediately something was wrong. Her mother called every single day, multiple times, rambling voicemails, long texts. It was annoying sometimes, sure, but it was constant. So when the calls stopped, when the texts went silent, Kim felt it in her gut. Something was wrong. She tried calling Martha over and over. No answer. She tried David. No answer. She reached out to other family members. No one had heard from Martha in days. So Kim did what any concerned daughter would do. She called police and asked them to check on her mother. Officers agreed to meet her at the house later that day, and when Kim arrived with her husband, ready to finally get some answers, she had no idea she was about to experience the most frustrating, infuriating day of her life, because the moment she started explaining her concerns, she could see it in their faces. They didn't believe her. They thought she was overreacting. Kim told them about David's death threats, about how he'd promised to make sure no one ever found Martha if he decided to hurt her, about the history of violence and control. She told them her mother was paranoid schizophrenic, yes, but she always stayed in contact, always. This silence was wrong. The officers listened, nodded, took notes, and then basically told her to wait and see. Martha's an adult. They said she has mental health issues. Maybe she's in a hospital, and they can't tell you because of privacy laws. Maybe she just doesn't want to talk to family right now. We can't break into her house just because she's not answering her phone. Come back if you have more information. Kim stood there in disbelief. Her mother was missing. The boyfriend, with a history of violence and death threats, wasn't answering, and police were telling her to go home and wait. But then something happened. A noise from inside the house, faint but distinct. Officers heard it too. They moved toward the door, calling out. No response. They knocked harder. Nothing. But they'd heard something. Someone was inside, and that someone was David Callahan, hiding in silence, waiting for them to leave. And this is where police made their first catastrophic mistake. Despite the very real possibility that Martha was inside in danger, despite Kim's warnings, despite the strange noise, officers made a decision. They told Kim there wasn't enough evidence to force entry. They suggested she file a missing persons report if she wanted, but honestly, they didn't think it was necessary. Martha would probably turn up on her own. Kim should just go home and wait. So they left, and David, standing inside the house breathing as quietly as possible, knew he'd just dodged a bullet. Imagine being Kim in that moment, standing outside your mother's house, knowing in your bones that something terrible has happened, hearing that noise from inside, watching officers approach the door, feeling that surge of hope that finally someone is taking this seriously, and then watching them turn around and walk away, telling you to be patient, telling you to wait, telling you that your mother, a grown woman, has the right to not answer her phone. Kim wasn't asking them to break down the door on a whim. She had specific, concrete reasons for concern: death threats, a history of domestic violence, an established pattern of daily contact suddenly broken, a boyfriend who wasn't answering either, and most damning of all, someone was clearly inside that house refusing to answer. Every single element that should have triggered a more aggressive response was present, but it didn't matter because Martha's mental health history had poisoned the well. It had created a bias so strong that even direct evidence of danger wasn't enough to overcome it. For the next several days, Kim did everything she could on her own. She called hospitals, psychiatric units, shelters, anywhere her mother might have gone if she was having an episode. Nothing. No one had seen Martha. She kept calling David. No answer. She kept calling police, begging them to take this seriously. And finally, after days of pressure, officers agreed to do another welfare check. But here's where things get even worse. The department sent new officers, ones who hadn't been briefed on the case, ones who had no idea about Kim's warnings or David's threats or the noise from inside the house. And because Kim had been talked out of filing an official missing persons report, these new officers had no paperwork to reference. They knocked on the door. No answer. Checked their notes. Saw that someone had already cleared the call days earlier. Assumed Martha had been located and everything was fine, and they left. Just like that, Kim watched them drive away, feeling utterly helpless. The system was failing her mother at every single turn. And David was still inside that house, walking on the floorboards, above Martha's buried body, sleeping in her bed, going through her things, getting bolder by the day. He even started using her phone, sending texts to Kim and other family members, short messages, impersonal, "I'm fine, I'm too busy, leave me alone." Kim knew immediately it wasn't her mother. The way the texts were written, the phrasing, the coldness. Martha didn't text like that. Someone was impersonating her, and Kim was absolutely certain it was David. She contacted police again, demanded they meet with her, told them she was getting texts from her mother's phone, but it wasn't her mother writing them. And this time, she gave them an ultimatum. Either you break into that house and check for my mother, or I'm doing it myself, and I don't care if I get arrested. The communication breakdown between different shifts and departments represents a systemic failure that goes beyond individual officer mistakes. When Kim was discouraged from filing an official missing persons report, that decision created a documentation gap that allowed subsequent officers to dismiss the case as already resolved. This is exactly the kind of bureaucratic failure that allows dangerous situations to spiral out of control. Information wasn't being shared, context wasn't being preserved, and Kim was forced to re-explain her mother's situation over and over to different people who had no institutional memory of previous interactions. Meanwhile, David was becoming more confident with each passing day. Each time police knocked and left, each time Kim's concerns were dismissed, each time he successfully impersonated Martha via text, he was learning that he could get away with this, that the system's biases were working in his favor, that Martha's mental health history was a shield he could hide behind indefinitely. And so he kept pushing, kept testing boundaries, kept walking that property, knowing what was buried beneath his feet. Finally, after weeks of inaction, police agreed to force entry. They met Kim at the property, pried open the door, and searched inside. The house was empty. No Martha, no David. But Kim noticed something immediately. None of her mother's belongings were there. No shoes, no clothes, no personal items, and most telling, no Pepsi in the refrigerator. Martha was obsessed with Pepsi, always had multiple cases stocked. The fridge was completely empty. Kim told officers this proved something was wrong, but the response she got was worse than dismissive. One officer made an offhand remark that revealed exactly what they really thought. "Would you have been surprised if she was laying dead in there?" he asked. Kim said yes, she would have been shocked. The officer shrugged. "Nothing surprises me." It was casual, flippant, like Martha's potential murder was just another Tuesday. Finally, after Kim's relentless pushing, police agreed to file an official missing persons report, but their tone made it clear they still didn't think this was urgent. They told Kim to keep them updated if she heard anything. Otherwise, there wasn't much they could do. Kim left that house feeling more alone than ever. Her mother was missing. The man who threatened to kill her was nowhere to be found, and the people who were supposed to help didn't believe her. But Kim wasn't giving up. She started her own investigation, put up missing person flyers all over town, talked to neighbors, asked around at places David was known to frequent, and eventually, she got a lead. David had been seen at a worksite recently. Multiple times, he hadn't disappeared. He was hiding in plain sight. Kim called police immediately, gave them the location, begged them to check it out, and this time, finally, they listened. That officer's comment about not being surprised if Martha was dead reveals something deeply troubling about how law enforcement was approaching this case. It suggests they'd already written Martha off as a probable casualty, that her life, her safety, her very existence was somehow less valuable because of her mental health status. It's the kind of casual dehumanization that happens when someone is seen as a problem rather than a person. Martha had been reduced in their minds to a statistic, another troubled woman, another difficult case, not someone's mother, not someone's loved one, not someone worth the extra effort. Kim heard that comment and understood immediately what she was up against. This wasn't just bureaucratic indifference. This was active disregard for her mother's life, and it fueled her determination to keep fighting, because if she gave up, if she stopped pushing, Martha would be forgotten entirely. She'd become one of those missing persons cases that gets filed away and never solved. A woman who disappeared, and nobody cared enough to find out why. Officers arrived at the worksite and started asking around. The workers confirmed it. David had been there not long ago, maybe 3 or 4 days. He was still in the area, still moving around freely. Officers now had confirmation that David hadn't vanished. He was accessible, and they needed to find him. But there was a problem. They still had no body, no physical evidence, no proof that Martha was even dead, let alone that David had killed her. So they kept looking, checked known addresses, talked to more people, and then, one night, they finally got lucky. Officers spotted a car parked beside Martha's house, the first sign of activity in days. They approached carefully, hoping to find Martha and put Kim's fears to rest. Instead, they found David standing in the doorway, calm, casual, like he had nothing to hide. Officers asked where Martha was. David's answer was smooth, practiced. "She's probably at her new boyfriend's house," he said. They'd broken up over a year ago. She'd moved on, been seeing someone else. He didn't know the guy's name or where he lived, but that's where she probably was. Officers asked when he'd last seen her. 5 or 6 days ago, David said, "right here at the house. She was fine, just off her meds again. You know how she gets." And then David did something brilliant. He turned the tables. He told officers that Kim, Martha's daughter, wasn't a reliable source. She and Martha had a terrible relationship. They'd gone months without speaking. The family had even changed their phone numbers to avoid her. At times, they treated Martha horribly, David said, so the fact that she wasn't talking to them now, not surprising at all. Officers listened, and suddenly, they weren't sure who to believe. Kim had been insistent, pushy, demanding, maybe a little too emotional. David, on the other hand, was calm, rational, cooperative. But then, officers remembered something. David had outstanding warrants, unrelated to Martha's case, misdemeanors, failure to appear in court, nothing major, but enough to arrest him. And that's when they made their smartest decision yet. They told David they were taking him downtown to clear up those warrants. Polite, helpful, just helping you get this sorted out. David didn't resist. He let them cuff him, escort him to the car, and drive him to jail. And just like that, David was in custody, not for murder, not for kidnapping, just for old warrants he'd been ignoring for months. But it gave detectives something crucial: time. David would be held in jail while those charges were processed, and that meant he couldn't run, couldn't cover his tracks, couldn't dispose of evidence. Detectives finally had a window to build their case, but the problem remained. They had no body, no confession, no physical proof that Martha was even dead. Time was running out. David's performance during that encounter with police was masterful in its manipulation. He didn't just deny wrongdoing, he redirected suspicion. He painted Kim as the unreliable one. He used Martha's mental health against her even in death, suggesting she was just off somewhere, having another episode, and he presented himself as the reasonable, concerned ex-boyfriend who was just as worried as everyone else. This is what sociopaths do. They mirror appropriate emotions. They say what people want to hear. They manipulate the narrative to make themselves look like victims or heroes. And it almost worked. Officers found his story plausible. They found Kim's emotional intensity off-putting. They were on the verge of letting him go. The only thing that saved this case was those outstanding warrants, that random stroke of bureaucratic luck that put David behind bars long enough for investigators to catch up. Without that, David might have walked away that night, might have had time to dispose of more evidence, might have fled the state entirely. Martha's body might never have been found, and then, just when it seemed like the case might stall forever, Martha's family received a message, anonymous, cryptic, chilling. If he was going to get rid of someone, he would bury them in the backyard. No one knew where it came from. Could have been a prank. Could have been someone with inside knowledge, but Martha's cousin Angelo wasn't taking any chances. She contacted police, gathered a few family members, and met officers at the property. This time, police took it seriously. They coordinated a search of the backyard, brought in forensic teams, Firefighters, EMS, just in case. Family members stood at a distance, watching as officers combed through the yard, looking for any sign of disturbance. And that's when they found it. The fire pit, loose dirt, ash, something underneath. They dug carefully, slowly, and then they saw it. What looked like a body part, partially decomposed, wrapped in plastic. Officers stopped immediately, called for the medical examiner, secured the scene, and while they waited for confirmation, they knew, everyone knew, this was Martha. Meanwhile, back at the station, detectives received word of the discovery, the body in the backyard. This was their moment. David was still in custody, still denying everything, but now they had leverage, real leverage. They brought him back into the interrogation room and confronted him with the truth. David sat down, still calm, still denying. Detectives told him they'd found remains in the backyard. David didn't flinch. They told him they knew he'd been lying, that he'd killed Martha and buried her under the fire pit. David shook his head, said he didn't know what they were talking about. But detectives weren't letting up this time. They laid it all out. The texts from Martha's phone, the forged rent check, the neighbor who saw him burning something in the middle of the night, the fire pit, the body. And slowly, bit by bit, David's mask started to crack. He stopped making eye contact, started fidgeting. His denials became weaker, less convincing. Detectives kept pushing, told him he could either confess and explain what happened, or be remembered as a heartless monster who murdered the woman he claimed to love. David sat in silence for a long moment, and then, finally, he broke. "I didn't mean to do it," David said, his voice quiet, shaking. "I just snapped." He told detectives what happened, the fight, Martha being relentless, never letting up. He grabbed the axe handle, hit her. She collapsed. He panicked, wrapped the rope around her neck and pulled. When she stopped moving, he didn't know what to do, so he waited until dark, carried her body outside, dug a pit, and buried her. Then he burned what he could, covered everything with dirt, built the fire pit on top, and for 30 days, he lived in her house, pretended she was alive, texted her family, cashed her checks, walked over her grave. Every single day, detectives listened in silence. When David finished, they asked if he felt better getting it off his chest. David just cried, said he loved her, didn't mean for it to happen, didn't plan it. But here's the thing, David had 30 days to confess, 30 days to do the right thing. Instead, he let Martha's daughter suffer, let her beg police to search, let her fight alone while he played the victim. And now, sitting in that interrogation room, his tears felt hollow, because David wasn't sorry he killed Martha. He was sorry he got caught back at the house. Officers confirmed what everyone already knew. The remains were Martha's, her body wrapped in bedding, sealed in plastic, burned, a rope still tied around her neck, blunt force trauma to the head. Kim was told immediately, and the grief, the anger, the sheer exhaustion of fighting for 30 days to be believed, all of it crashed down on her at once. Officers tried to comfort her, told her she'd done everything right, but Kim couldn't stop thinking about all the moments they could have saved Martha. The first welfare check when David was hiding inside, the second check when officers left without searching, the weeks of dismissing her concerns because Martha was mentally ill. If they just listened, if they just believed her, Martha might still be alive. David was formally charged with murder, abuse of a corpse, and tampering with evidence. He's now serving a very long sentence behind bars, but the damage was done. A woman who saw danger coming and tried to warn everyone was ignored until it was too late. A daughter who solved her own mother's murder was dismissed as paranoid, and a system that should have protected Martha failed her at every turn. But here's what keeps me awake, and maybe it'll keep you awake too. That anonymous message, the one that told Martha's family to check the backyard. No one ever figured out who sent it. Police investigated, tried to trace it, came up empty. So who knew? Who sent that message? Was it someone David confided in? A neighbor who saw something? A coworker who overheard a conversation? Or was it David himself? Think about it. He was in jail when the message was sent. Maybe he realized he was about to be charged anyway. Maybe he wanted them to find the body, wanted to control how the story ended. Or maybe, just maybe, there was someone else involved. Someone who helped David cover it up. Someone who knew where Martha was buried because they watched him do it. Police never found answers to those questions. The investigation focused on David, on his confession, on making sure he never walked free again. But that message remains a mystery, a loose thread in a case that should have been simple, but became a nightmare because no one believed the mentally ill woman or her desperate daughter. So I'll leave you with this. How many Marthas are out there right now? Women whose warnings are dismissed because of mental illness, addiction, or past behavior. How many Kims are fighting alone, screaming for help while authorities tell them to wait and see? And how many Davids are getting away with murder because the system assumes their victims aren't worth investigating? Martha deserved better. Kim deserved better. And every single person involved in this case knows it. The question is whether anything will change, or whether the next Martha will be ignored, just like this one. If this case made you as angry as it made me, if you're thinking about all the moments Martha could have been saved, then you need to see what I've uncovered next. Check the video on your screen now. I believe it was made for you, because some stories don't just shock you, they force you to confront how broken the system really is. And trust me, you won't want to miss this one.